Hello and welcome to Tableau Tutorial Part 2. My name is Michelle and I'm with the Simplilearn team. If you missed Tableau Tutorial Part 1, please check out the link in the comments below. Today we're going to talk about building dashboards in Tableau based on cricket data from the Indian Premier League. Please comment below for access to this dataset, and somebody from the Simplilearn team will get back to you and then you can follow along. If you have any questions about creating a data source off of a text data set, then go ahead and comment below or check out tutorial part 1 in which we go over that information. So we're going to get started, and in this visualization we're going to look at batsman information. So let me rename the sheet and I'm going to call it All Innings Score. And so by the end of this, we're going to have two visualizations, two dashboards. One of them focuses on batsmen and one of them focuses on bowlers. Some of the use cases behind this is if you are trying to figure out who did the best of the batsmen and who did the best of the bowlers, for if you were trying to put together a team. So let's get started. We're going to look at batsmen. And here we have listed out all the batsmen. We're going to make this visualization so that you can look at just one batsman at a time. So I'm going to right click on batsman and click show filter. And now we have a filter over here with all of our batsmen, and we can choose just one or all of them. Let's just look at one for now. And then we're also going to look at their information across all of their matches. So we're going to bring on match ID. And now we have all of the matches for this batsman. Now we have quite a few matches, so we're going to allow them to filter to just one season, 1 year. So if I right click on date and click show filter, it gives me this automatic year filter. So we'll just filter to maybe 2014. And now we have all of those matches for 1 year for one batsman. And we want to look at the runs for this batsman. So we'll pull runs out here onto rows, and it now gives us bars for all of those rows. If we were looking at multiple batsmen, so I select all here, it'll section them out by their names, but it's a little bit difficult to tell where one batsman ends and one begins. Sometimes it's not that visually easy, even though there are lines, so we could make those lines darker, or another thing we could do is take batsman and pull it onto color, and now each batsman gets their own color, and it's a lot easier to tell the difference. Let's go back to just looking at one batsman. And let's sort the matches from smallest to biggest as in number of runs. So here we have all of the runs for this batsman per match. If we look at multiple batsmen, you can see how he did as opposed to other batsmen. There we go. Let's move on to our next visualization. It's going to be about... I'm going to click on the sheet, click rename, and type of dismissal. So now we're going to make a chart that shows you for one batsman for 1 year what kinds of dismissals they had. So we want the filters we made on all inning scores over here to also apply to this worksheet. So let's talk about filters a little bit. When we right click on filters, we can hover over apply to worksheets, and we have these options. We have all using related data sources, all using this data source, or only this worksheet. And that's because we haven't built a second worksheet yet. We have another worksheet, but it doesn't have the batsman information on it. Come right click on year, same thing. So when I bring any information on this worksheet, we just need to have some information on this worksheet for it to start being taken seriously. So I drag dismissal on to color, I go back to this sheet, right click, and now we should have another option. Only this worksheet, selected worksheets, all using this data source, or all using related data source. We're going to use the option selected worksheets. Now why would we use the option selected worksheet instead of all using this data source? This is because we're going to apply these filters to all of the batsman worksheets, but as I mentioned before, we're also going to make visualizations based on the bowlers, and we're not going to use this same filter on the bowlers worksheets. So I'm going to click selected worksheets, choose my worksheet, and hit OK. I'll do the same thing here on year, apply to worksheet, selected worksheet, and do the same thing. Okay, so because of filters and because how they can You can have different filters per worksheet, or one filter that affects 2 worksheets but not the other worksheets. It's best, in my mind, to do all of your filters at the end when you're actually building the dashboard, so that you can keep track of what the filter affects and what it doesn't. In this case, for our purposes, we've done it already. So now we're looking at just one batsman, just 1 year. But my preference is to do it at the end. Now we brought on dismissal kind and put it onto color, and I want to make a pie chart, so I'm going to click on marks and change it to pie. And right now there's nothing telling this visualization how big each slice of the pie should be. So you need to drag something onto angle. Let's first make the pie bigger just so that we can see it better. And then let's also remove the dismissal kind of null. So we have null dismissal kind, and that's when the batsman did not get out. However, we're trying to keep track of how many times they did get out, so this isn't relevant. So I right-clicked on null over here and clicked exclude. What that did was made a filter right here on dismissal kind. And we click edit, and you can see it's excluding null. So that's what right-clicking and clicking exclude did. So right now it's doing 50 and 50. It doesn't know how big to make each angle, and we want it to count the dismissal kind, and that's how it'll determine how big to make each angle. So I'm going to drag dismissal kind onto angle, and I get an error. Why would I get an error? I would get an error because it's treating it like a dimension, and a dimension is by definition not something you use to measure things with. And so you can't say this angle should be this big based on a dimension. So we're going to change it to a measure, which is when we're going to count the dimensions. So we're going to do a count of dismissal kind. So if they got out because they were bowled out, then we'll count how many times that happened, and that will determine the red angle or the orange angle. And if it was caught, that will determine the red angle. So count. Great, so now we can see 5 and 6. So, for this batsman, for this year, he was out 11 times, 5 times because it was caught, 5 times because it was bowled. Let's control and drag dismissal kind onto label. So now we can quickly see the 5 and the 6. And we're going to control drag dismissal kind onto label, and we can see which kind of dismissal it was. That keeps us from having to need this legend. So we can click hide card, and we don't need that anymore. Now we're going to make another pie chart based on runs. So since I'm making a second pie chart, I'm going to duplicate this. There are some pros and cons to duplicating it. One of the pros is when we come up here to filters and we come to selected sheets, we can see that the filters that applied to type of dismissal are automatically applied here onto type of dismissal too. And so that's great news because we do want it to be filtered to just one batsman and just 1 year. However, we don't want it to filter out dismissal kind of null anymore, because now we're looking at runs, and runs need to have the times when they didn't get out. So we're going to pull dismissal kind off. And if you weren't paying very close attention or you copied it, then you might be confused as to why things were getting filtered out, but it was because it copied your filters as well. So that's one of the disadvantages of copying. Let's rename it runs distribution. And I'm going to pull off all of this information here so that we're starting from scratch. So here we have basically blank pie chart. And we're going to look at batsman runs. So there are a couple different kinds of runs that you can get. So I want batsman runs to determine color, but when I drag batsman runs onto color, it's doing a sum of batsman runs. And it's just trying to make it darker or lighter depending on how many runs there were. But that's not what I want. I want to use it as a dimension. And now we can see we have 0 through 6. And that means that a batsman either has 0 runs or 1, 2, 4, or 6 runs. Now there is 3 runs as well. However, because we're only selecting 1 year and 1 batsman, this particular batsman for this particular year only had either 0 runs, 1 run, 2, 4, or 6. So when we change it to a dimension, it's now, instead of summing up all of the runs, it is now just showing you their options. But it's still doing it like a scale from light to dark. I want 6 distinct colors, 1 for each. So I'm going to change it from a continuous type of field to a discrete type of field. And now I have 0, 1, 2, 4, and 6. Now I want to exclude 0 runs because I'm not trying to keep track of how many times they didn't get a run. I'm trying to keep track of how many times they got different kinds of runs. So again, let's exclude it. And now we have our 4 different kinds. And just to show this, I right-clicked on year, I click show filter, and if I show all the years, you can see our 5th kind of run where they got 3 runs on 1 ball shows up. So it does exist, it just didn't happen for this particular batter or batsman during that year. Now we want the angle to be determined by batsman runs. However, we don't want to sum up the batsman runs. We don't want to take every time that he got a 6 and do 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6. What we want to do is count how many times he got a 6. So we're going to change it from a sum to a count. And you can see he got a 6 24 times. And so before, let's go back, it was taking 24 and timesing it by 6, which is 144, and summing up each of those times. But instead we want to count each of those times and see how many times he got a 6 and how many times he got a 4, not how many points were scored when by getting a 6. So that's a little bit of a confusing thing to think about. Another thing you could do is, instead of doing a count of batsman runs, let's pull that off, you could use this number of records field, and that will show us how many, meaning the number of records, how many records did we have from this batsman in this year that showed that he batted a 6. So drag number of records onto angle, and you see we get the same thing that we had before. So those are 2 ways of doing it. Either change the batsman runs to a count, or grab number of records. Number of records is a little bit simpler. So let's also bring number of records onto the label, and we can see quickly that mostly he got 1s and got more 4s than he got 2s actually, which might be interesting to people who are trying to see how well this batsman does. Our next visualization has to do with the batsman's strike rate. So we'll make our new sheet, season, strike rate. And we'll need to make a calculated field to be able to determine the strike rate for a batsman. So we'll come here to this arrow, click on it, and click Create Calculated Field. We'll call it strike rate. And we're going to find out how many runs that a batsman gets basically for every 100 balls bowled. So we're going to get the total of the runs by doing a sum of batsman runs. We're going to divide it by the number of balls bowled. We know that this data set is 1 row per ball bowled. It's the ball by ball data. So we're just going to divide it by the number of rows, number of records. And we're going to put all of that in parentheses. And one thing I need to do is, instead of just number of records, I need it to be the sum of number of records, so that it adds them all up before it divides it. Okay, so sum of the runs divided by the sum of the bowled balls, and we will multiply that by 100. And that is our strike rate. Okay, so now that we have our strike rate, we can start building our visualization. We would like to have both of these filters, so I'm going to quickly apply it. So first build the visualization and then apply it. We're going to come here and bring date onto columns, and it's giving us 1 per year. we're going to change our marks card. No, let's leave our marks card the way it is. And then we are going to bring on our bowler. And we're going to bring on our strike rate next to bowler. Okay. So now that we have kind of the beginnings of our visualizations, let's go here and we can now apply it to our new worksheet. Apply the existing filters. One of the reasons it's so important to apply the existing filters to our worksheet. There we go. Now we can quickly see his strike rate for 2014. I'm going to control drag strike rate onto label, and we have it there as well. Okay, one of the reasons it's so important to use the same filter that is applied to all of these selected worksheets, instead of just bringing batsman back on and making our new filter each time, is we want on the dashboard to just have one filter that applies to all of them. So you can see here when I change this to 2015 and remove 2014, and then we go to season strike rate, we can see this one's also 2015 now. And we'll go back to 2014, season strike rate, and this one's also 2014. So what we want, whenever a filter is changed, for it to affect all of the visualizations associated with our dashboard. And so all of our visualizations that are about batsmen and their information, we want to be able to use the same filters. So I'm going to click Show Filter quickly, and we're going to see what happens to this dot when I add more years. So this is going to allow them to see the strike rate per 100 balls over time if they select more periods. Our next visualization is going to be called Team versus Player. And we're going to see how many runs a batsman scores against particular teams. So we're going to bring on bowling team, because that's the team the batsman is against. We're going to bring on batsmen and their batsman run. So now we can see how many runs each batsman scored against all of these different teams. And again, we're going to apply our filters. There we go. Let's also bring batsmen onto color again, just for when we're looking at multiple batsmen at once in our filters. And we're going to bring the batsman runs onto label. There we go. So now we can have it in both places instead of just pulling it off and putting it on the new one. Great, team versus player. And our last visualization for the batsman dashboard is going to be called balls per boundary. So we're going to see how many balls bowled it takes for a batsman to get a boundary. But we have balls per boundary calculated here, and also a boundaries count calculated here. However, we're going to show you how to make our own versions of these calculations. So I'm going to create a calculated field. I'm going to call it boundaries count. And it won't let me save it as boundaries count because I can't have it saved as the same name. At least in Tableau Desktop, that's true. It looks like Tableau Public isn't getting mad at me for that. So, but I'm going to change the name to boundaries count calculated, so we can tell the difference between the one that existed and the one that we calculated. And we are going to do an if statement. So if the batsman runs, the individual batsman's runs, not the sum over whatever we select. If batsman's run is greater than or equal to 4, then 1, else 0. So It's giving me an error because I always need to have an end whenever I do an if statement. And this shows that whenever a boundary happens, so if they scored 4 or 6 on one ball, then we'll count it 1, otherwise 0. And if I sum this up, then we'll be able to count how many boundaries they had. So apply. Okay. And for example, if I brought on a batsman, all the batsmen, and I brought on boundaries count calculated, this should be counting up how many boundaries they had over all time. So that's the numbers we're getting here. Okay, let's back it out. Now we're going to make our new calculated field called balls per boundary. Calculated. Just so that it's clear which one is which. And we're going to count all the balls. So this is for every ball bowled. So we're counting the balls. We could also use the number of records here, similar to what we talked about earlier. And we're going to divide it by the sum of the boundaries count calculated. So this will show us how many balls it takes to get a boundary. Apply. Okay. Great, now we can start building our visualization. And we are going to bring on batsmen onto columns. And we're going to bring balls per boundary calculated onto rows. And now it's showing us how many balls it takes for the boundaries. Let's also bring batsmen onto color. I've got to hold control when I do that. There we go. So we have batsman here and batsman here. And we're going to do the same thing. Hold control, drag this down to label. And we can see the exact number. And for the final time, we're going to apply our filters. Now, I could have waited and applied my filters at the very end once I had all of these built. Again, I do recommend applying your filters at the end. Now we're going to put together the first of our 2 dashboards. So I'm going to click on dashboard here. I'm going to change it to automatic size, which will fill my screen. And I'm going to change it back to fixed size. So now we have our width and our height based on what automatic size was. Let's just round it out a little bit. So instead of 1678, I'm going to change it to be just an even 1600 and same even 900. So now we have our fixed size here. There's also, you could change it to a laptop browser or a full screen. So if we click full screen, there's that size. Generic desktop. I'm going to go back to my size. The size that works for you is going to be based on the size that works the best for all of your users. So that will take some research on your side. And before I get started, I'm going to do some formatting of my dashboard. So I'm going to click Format here, and I'm going to change the default shading for the dashboard to this particular shade. You can use this color selector or all of these different kinds of basic colors. And so it just gives it a different color than just the basic white. So that's a quick way to change the whole dashboard color. And I'm also going to bring on some text for the title of the dashboard. Let's name our dashboard. We're going to call it Batsman Performance. Let's actually spell it out there. Okay. And then down here it says Show Dashboard Title. So I'm going to select that, and we have Batsman Performance there at the top. If you don't want the title here to match what's here, you have a couple options. So you can click Edit Title and put in whatever you want. You can also we'll click Floating here, and we're going to just drag text on here. And That allows you to be able to make your own title like that as well, or just whatever text you need to put on your dashboard. So we'll just remove that from our dashboard. And we're going to bring on our visualizations, but we're going to bring them on as floating visualizations. So I've selected floating here versus tiled. Floating allows you to bring something on and drop it, and wherever it lands is where it lands. And you can move it around, and it's not going to try to automatically fill this area. If I change it to tiled, and I bring this on, it'll fill the area, or I'll put it to the left or the right, and it will fill those sides. So back to floating. Floating has some benefits where you can just drop things and they will land there. However, if you make it floating, then you have to adjust the size of each individual thing instead of just, say, if we brought it on, undo that, as tiled, and we brought on this, and we brought on this, if I wanted to adjust the size of these things, I can just drag this little line in between, and it just tiles them and they fill the space you give them. Versus with floating, when I bring on this, and I bring on this, then I have to, if I want to adjust the sizes, I can make this one smaller, and then I need to make this one bigger independently of that. So, there are some pros and cons of doing it either way. But we are going to do it the floating way. And we are going to bring on team versus player first. And put it here. Then we're going to bring on, underneath that, type of dismissal. So basically all of our dashboards, one at a time. Here's where our balls per boundary goes. Our runs distribution goes over here. And it brings in whatever filters you showed at the time and all the legends that are showing up on that visualization. So if I go back to runs distribution, you can see we had gear and that legend on there, and it brought them in as well. Let's also bring on season strike rate, which also had year, and all inning score. Okay, so this is the one that had all inning score, if you recall, was the first one we made that originally had our two filters. So we're going to change our filters from multiple value list to multiple value drop down. And that causes it to take up way less space. It still has an incredible height, so we're going to go to layout and we're going to change the height to something more reasonable. 100 just brings it onto the screen so that I could drag it like that. There we go. And then year of date. We're going to edit this one, let's see, to be multiple value drop down as well. And again, a more reasonable height for a multiple value drop down. Okay, so we've got started. We have this legend here for color for batsman, which we're going to remove because it has the name on it generally. And we're going to figure out how wide we want these to be. So we need all three of them to fit in our width 1600. So that would be a width around 500 each. So let's go to layout here, and we're going to change the width from 533 to 500 on each of these visualizations. And that gives us some extra space to go in between them all. It's a little bit more reasonable, the space in between. There we go. And run distribution. So once I've kind of figured out my spacing to go in between them, I can line up these bottom ones by matching the Y or X value. So this X is 25, and this one I want it to line up with it up and down, so I'll change my X to 25, and it shifts it over. This one is 555, so I'm going to change this one. And this one, I'm just going to copy and paste this one into this one. Now we kind of have the X figured out. And I want them all to line up along the y as well. So I'm going to take this 170, and I'm going to apply the 170 to all three of these so that they line up perfectly. This is another benefit of having it be a floating object, because on a tile object you can't determine their position exactly, otherwise it would mess up all of the tiles around it. But you also don't need to put them quite as precisely in order, because when you do tiled, it kind of lines them up along lines as they are tiled. Great. So this is a lot more straightforward. Let's get these. I'll get this guy about where I want it, and then I'll line this one up with it. Up and down. There we go. We can also come here and edit the title and just make the font a little bit bigger on both of these. And now let's make the worksheets here individually a little bit closer to the color that we picked for our background. So I'm going to right click right on top of the chart and click Format. Then I'm going to go to the shading section, and on the worksheet I'm going to choose more colors. You see the color that we selected before for the background is in this little palette of recently used colors. And I want one that's slightly different than that, so I'm just going to enter in the one that I want, and I'll copy that so I can use it on the others. However, if I did want the same color as I had there, I could just select it right out of the recently used colors. Okay. And there we go. We'll come here, right click on the chart, click Format, Shading, and I'm gonna paste in that color. And you see when I clicked from here to here, it kept me right on that same sheet. However, you see that this went to white instead of the darker color I had before. And so I don't even have to click Format again. I can just come here and paste in my color. So I have a color that matches more closely to my background color, but is still different enough that I still have the outline, kind of the shape of having like cards on this dashboard. We go full screen here. We now have our dashboard that allows us to see all of the batsman performance information for whatever batsman we choose and whatever year we choose. So when we change the year, all of the charts update. We want to change the batsman to one of these Chris's. There we go. Some of them aren't in the year 2014, which is the problem we were having. There we go. So now we see all of the same information, but for Chris instead. So now that we've made our batsman dashboard, we're going to move on to making our bowler dashboard. Our first visualization for the bowler is going to be called Bowler Performance Against Team. It's very similar to the one that we made for batsmen, only it's showing how the bowler has performed against batting teams and the wickets that they got against those batting teams. So we're going to bring on the batting team so we can see all of the batting teams against them. We're going to bring on bowler so that it separates it out by bowler. One more try. We'll also put bowler onto color. And we're going to bring on player dismissed. No, sorry. We're going to bring on dismissal kind. We brought on dismissal kind, but I want to change it to be a measure and a count of the dismissal kinds. And let's put it here. So now we have a bar chart for the dismissal kind. You can see that it's going 0 to 30 for each of these. And that's because we have some that go all the way up to 30 against a team. And if we wanted, we could edit the axis and change it to be independent axis ranges for each row or column. So now we can see that it is 0 to 2 for this guy, but 0 to 30 for this guy. And that can be nice when you want to be able to look at them independently. However, when we're looking at them side by side and you're trying to compare, we would think that maybe this person did just as good as somebody like this person. So we're not going to do that because it could be misleading. Also, in the end, I'm going to have filters so that we're looking at one bowler at a time and 1 year at a time. So we won't need to see them all at once. Okay. We have bowler on color. Let's also control drag the count of dismissal kind on the label. So now it's labeled. Some of them are going to have a lot fewer against teams. Maybe they didn't play as many seasons and that they might have a lot more. That's why we're going to have the filter for a per season number. But we're not going to do that right away. Okay. Next workbook. Worksheet. And we're going to call it bowler versus player. So when we're looking at this at one bowler at a time, we can see how the bowler has done versus particular players. So we're going to bring on the batsman here. And then we're going to bring on dismissal kind here. And again, we're going to change it to a count measure. And we can count all the dismissals against particular players. When we filter it down to one bowler, we can see how they did versus certain players, and then in just 1 year. Let's sort biggest to smallest. We're going to bring batsman onto color. And that way when we switch from bowler to bowler, we could kind of see which batsmen fall in certain areas. It also just makes it quick to follow it along to the edge. And we could put count of dismissal onto label here so that it's easy to quickly see. However, when we filter it down to just one bowler and 1 year, then there's going to be a lot fewer dismissals per batsman. So it'll be pretty easy to see. So let's not do that. Let's go on to our next worksheet. And this one is going to be called bowling average. So we need to create a bowling average calculation. It's going to be runs conceded per wickets taken. So we have to come up with our runs conceded, which is all of the batsman runs. We'll sum those up and divide it by the number of wickets, which is the count of dismissal kind. And now we have our bowling average. There is a bowling average that already existed, so again, we're going to call it bowling average calculated so that we know which one's ours. Okay, apply, done. And we're going to bring on the bowler and bowler onto color. And let's bring on our bowling average calculated. We're going to sort it biggest to smallest. It might be better to sort it smallest to biggest. But some of these players might not have played or bowled, so that's why we'll have nulls. So, biggest to smallest it is. And let's also bring the bowling average that we made onto the label. Great. Our next sheet, we will also need to make a calculated field for this one. And let me hurry and name it, and then I'm going to go back to bowling average because I had one more thing to do there. Economy rate is our next sheet. Okay, so for bowling average, we have a situation where maybe somebody doesn't know what the bowling average means. So you can right-click on your chart in the outside area, outside of the graph area, and click on caption. And the caption will pop up. And it's automatically making a caption, which is bowling average calculated for each bowler. It's just describing what's happening. And then it says color shows details about the bowler, which it does. And the marks are labeled by the bowling average calculated. So when I double click on the caption, I can change it to be whatever I want, which I'm going to put runs conceded per wicket taken. And now we have a caption that kind of is describing what this visualization means. So on economy rate, the economy is defined as the number of runs conceded for each over bowled. So instead of the runs conceded per wicket taken, it's for each over. So we're going to create our calculated field. We're going to call it economy calculated. Again, we have to get a sum of our runs. There's our runs. We're going to divide it by the count of the balls. So this will tell us how many balls were thrown. But we don't want how many balls were thrown. We want how many overs there were. So just to make this a little more clear, I'm going to put parentheses around this. And we're going to take, there are 6 balls thrown in an over. So we're going to take the number of balls and divide it by 6 to get the number of overs. So we'll take batsman runs, and then this is per over. Hit OK. And for this visualization, it's going to be pretty similar to the last one, where we're going to bring on economy, and we're going to put economy onto, I'm going to hold control and put it onto label. Sum of economy. Oh, it's not even using my calculated field. So, economy calculated. There we go. Now it's much more reasonable. We'll drag economy calculated onto label. And since this dashboard is going to be meant to be viewed one bowler at a time, we're going to not split it out by bowler in this situation. But you could. And if you do split it out by bowler, that means they could select more than one bowler at a time and see their economy side by side. Also here, we can see that it says economy calculated for our label. And if we hit edit axis, we can change the title. So we're just going to call it economy. Probably need to do the same thing for bowling average. There we go. Edit axis. Bowling average. Okay. It got mad because I didn't close it. And then there we have it. Again, I'm going to right-click in some empty space and click caption. And then we have our caption here. Edit caption. And we're going to put average runs conceded. Okay. There we go. We have our caption. We have our chart. And we have one more visualization to make for our dashboard. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please put them below, and somebody from the Simplilearn team will help us answer those questions. Or if you have an answer to somebody else's question, feel free to chime in. We'll get a good discussion going. The last one is called a dismissal. And we're going to look at, kind of like we did before, a type of dismissal, but this was the batter and how they got dismissed. Whereas this is the bowler and how they took the wicket. So we are going to also make a pie chart, which means dismissal kind goes on to color, and we change the marks to pie. So we have a pie that shows a color for each of the dismissal kinds. Again, let's remove null. So again, I came over here, right-clicked, and clicked exclude. But you can do it right on the visualization. Dismissal kind, and you see how it's blank instead of bold or cotton bold. And click exclude there. So there it makes our filter. Next we need to determine the angle size. We're going to bring on number of records. And the more records that fall under that dismissal kind, that means the more often that kind happened. And let's bring number of rows, number of records onto label as well. And also we're going to entire view so that it's nice and big and easy to read. And we're going to add a caption. And we're just going to put dismissal types. We'll see how that comes up on the visualization. So now that we have made all of our visualizations for our dashboard, let's add our filters. So just on this last one, I'm going to bring Bowler onto filter. And we're going to click use. Let's actually select a bowler. You can use this box to search. There we go, and it's popped up. You see how I didn't even have to start searching it at the beginning of the name. It's just smart enough. So we have our bowler. Let's bring on date. We're going to choose years. And let's choose 2016. And we have our year. And now let's apply it to all the worksheets that it applies to. So dismissal, economy rate, bowling average, bowling versus player, and bowler performance against team. Same for year. Okay, and you can see how much quicker that is to apply instead of doing it every time you make a new dashboard. So, much quicker, saves you some time, can be confusing, so make sure you do it, because if you forget to do it and then you change a filter on a dashboard and it only changes one of the visualizations on that dashboard, then it can be really confusing. And like on the batsman performance, if we had forgotten to add these to all the visualizations and we left it off of this visualization, then people could be confused as to why that's not changing. Or off of this visualization, if it's not changing, it's hard to know if it's not changing because it didn't change from year to year. Maybe his types of dismissal were the same from year to year. Or it's just hard to tell the difference and see if it's not affecting it. So always be sure to double check that your filters are applied to everything you need them to be applied to. Let's make a dashboard. Okay. We're going to make it what we made it before. 1600 by 900. And you can see all of our sheets are showing up. But let me show you a quick trick here. This dashboard uses all of the batsman sheets, and we don't use any of the batsman sheets again inside of the second dashboard. So if I right click on the batsman performance and I click hide all sheets, it doesn't hide all sheets, it just hides all sheets associated with that dashboard. And now you no longer see those sheets. And then I come to dashboard 2, it's only showing me the sheets that are not hidden for that dashboard. Let's get started by first changing our dashboard color. So I came to dashboard and I hit format. And I'm going to change the color to this blue color. And there's our background. And then I'm going to click show dashboard title, which is dashboard 2 right now. So let's rectify that right now. And we're going to call it bowler performance. And here we have bowler performance. Let's do floating, which is already selected. And we're going to bring on bowler performance against team. And we're going to go side by side with bowler versus player. And it's brought on, both of these have brought on legends that are actually not helpful because we have labels that tell us these things. So we're going to get rid of these legends. Sometimes I wait till I have brought on all of my dashboards before I remove legends or change filters. So all of my worksheets. Sometimes I wait till I've brought on all my worksheets. I'm going to bring on bowling average and economy rate and dismissal. Here's an actually useful legend, so we'll keep that around. remove this legend, because right there, it just tells you right next to it. And now let's start adjusting our charts. So I'm going to make these two side by side up here, so they need to split the space. So let's try a width of 750, which gives you a little bit of space side to side, but still uses the space a little bit better. You can see that this visualization is too tall to fit inside of the area we've given it, so it has a scroll bar here on the side. If you change how this fills in its space, so right now it's standard, you can have fit width, which it's already fitting the width of the area that is provided. If you do fit height, it's going to force everything to fit inside of that area, so there's no scroll bar, and it does not look good for this visualization. And then entire view, it's the same thing. It's trying to make everything fit inside that area. So we're going to go back to standard. Another one that's good for things where you do want the scroll bar up and down is fit width. So either of those look good. These two are going to share space underneath this one. And so I'm going to make them both, let's say, 300. How does that look? That looks good. Let's make this one the same size as this above it. 750. Bring it over. Okay. You notice one thing that's happening here is we cannot see, at this point, the filters. There are no filters popping in here, even though we added filters. Now, why would that be? That's because we have no filters being shown on our visualization. None of our worksheets showed the filters, they just existed here. So, if we come and we click on one of our visualizations, click the drop-down arrow, and we go to filters, we can see all of the filters we can select from. We're going to bring on Bowler. Let's make it the drop-down. And again, it's just made it a really unreasonable height because it was trying to fit all of those bowlers. But 20 is too small. There we go. And we'll go here and also bring on year of date. What's the height on this one? 55. 55 is a good height. Now it's time to clean it up a bit. So we have all of our pieces. Let's first make sure when I change this that everything changes. So when I unselect 2016, they should all go to null, and when I click Fit 2015, they all update. That's what we want to see. Okay, so we have all the pieces. We just need to get them lined up, looking nice, and just getting things a little bit more clean. Like here, we want to show our caption that we added. And here. And here. So this kind of is something that you can use on your dashboard to describe things that are happening or different pieces of it. It's just an easy way to add a caption. And then let's line them up and down. I think that we could probably make both of these a little taller. What do we think about 350? Maybe even 400. And we'll bring these ones down. That's really nice for this visualization to have more space. Just a little bit more space. Whatever you can give it, honestly, is really helpful. Sometimes with these visualizations that are up and down, I like to give them the whole side to themselves. So maybe we would move this over and make it smaller, and these all three would fit right here, and then I'd give this one all of this up and down space. I'll undo that. We can move this legend over a little bit more. There we go. And then let's start lining things up. I like where this one is positioned on the y-axis, so I'm going to copy that and bring it over here. They were pretty close. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the y-axis for these ones, just to make sure they're perfectly lined up. These, it looks like I could make a little bit wider, if you would like. One thing that's happening here is it looks a little bit like this one has more up and down space than this one does. And that's because it's missing this label. And it also isn't colored the same as these other ones as it represents the bowler. Well, we can fix that, because if you remember, we did not put bowler onto the columns. We put it on there. There's our label. We also didn't put it onto color. And there we go. So that gives us a little bit more consistency between these two visualizations. However, they're still labeled economy rate and bowling average with their captions at the bottom there. Okay. And since these are the same width, I would like to line them up on the x-axis. So I'm going to take this there, and that lines those up. I want to make sure that these are lined up and down, pretty close, but not quite there. There we go. And also, year of date is not necessarily what I want. The of date part is just not useful for what we need. So I'm going to change it to year. I'm also going to center it. We'll come here for bowler and center that one as well. Center. And also, let's make it a little bigger. See how it did not make it bigger? That is because the formatting in here, such as changing the font or bolding it, requires you to have whatever text you want selected. So now it's bigger. There we go. I like the white on the blue, so I won't change these individual dashboards or individual worksheets to be a different color. Let's take a look. Here we have our second dashboard. If we come here and we click Hide All Sheets, now you can only see the two dashboards in these tabs at the bottom. And you can see that we can have different years for the two different dashboards. You could tie the year together. Oh, we have year of date on this one too. Let's change that. So, that's not what I meant to click. There we go. Edit title. We're going to make it centered. We're going to make it bigger. Don't press enter when you're not done. And we're going to erase of date. So that's just year. Do the same thing over here. This just adds a little bit of consistency. They are two separate dashboards. But if people are going to look at them side by side maybe, or one right after the other, it is nice to have some consistency. There we go. So, there you have it. We have made two dashboards. One of them about batsman performance, one of them about bowler performance. During this time, we learned about formatting our dashboards. We learned about floating versus tiled, and about positioning legends and filters, some of the options we have for changing filters. We learned about different ways to make different visualizations. So we made pie charts and bar charts. And we also learned about applying filters to just the worksheets that you want for those dashboards. And finally, we learned about adding captions. Thank you for watching Tableau Tutorial Part 2. If you enjoyed it and you didn't watch Part 1, go ahead and do so now. The information for that is in the comments below. Also, for more information, visit www.simplilearn.com. And if you have any questions, please comment below. Thank you and have a great day.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.